They say miracles often come in disguises, not with wings or light from heaven, but through people, ordinary people, whose timing feels too perfect to be coincidence. This is the story of one such miracle. Her name was Elena, a 32-year-old woman whose world had quietly fallen apart. She once had a promising job, a cozy apartment, and a laughter that filled rooms. But life, in its cruel unpredictability, had taken everything in waves. First, her mother's sudden death. Then the loss of her job during company downsizing. And finally, her fiancé walking out, on the very day she needed him most. By the time autumn came, Elena had lost her will to fight. Bills piled up like reminders of failure. She stopped answering calls. Her friends stopped calling too. The world kept spinning, but she stood still. Each morning, she'd sit by the window, clutching a chipped mug of cold tea, staring at the street below. The cars, the people rushing to work, laughter from somewhere distant. She would whisper, almost bitterly, "Where are you, God? Do you still see me?" And silence would answer. That evening, it rained, not the gentle kind, but a thunderstorm that roared like the sky itself was grieving. Elena was returning from a failed job interview, her shoes soaked, mascara smudged, heart heavier than ever. The city lights blurred through the rain like tears. She stopped under an old bus stop shelter, alone, shivering. Her phone buzzed. Final notice, eviction due in 3 days. She sighed, her breath trembling. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. It wasn't a cry for attention. It was a quiet surrender, the kind only heaven hears. Then a voice behind her said softly, "Long day." She turned. A man stood a few feet away, middle-aged, with tired eyes but a gentle smile. He wore an old brown coat and held a paper bag from a bakery. He wasn't anyone special, but something about his presence felt calm. "Yes," Elena said faintly, forcing a smile. "You could say that." He nodded slowly. "You look like you haven't eaten." She laughed bitterly. "That obvious?" "Only to those who've been there," he replied. Then, without asking, he opened the bag and handed her a warm croissant. "Take it. It's fresh." Elena hesitated. She didn't want pity, but hunger spoke louder than pride. She accepted it quietly. They stood there under the shelter, listening to the rain. No small talk, no questions. Just two strangers sharing silence. After a while, he said, "You know, sometimes life breaks us just enough so light can get in." Elena looked at him, confused. He smiled faintly. "You don't need to understand it now. Just hold on a little longer." When the rain stopped, she turned to thank him. But he was gone. Only the paper bag remained, with another pastry and a folded note inside. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The note read, "God still sees you. Don't give up yet. A friend." Tears streamed down her face. It was simple, just words on paper, but it pierced her heart like light in darkness. The next morning, she woke up, and for the first time in weeks, she prayed. Not for money, not for miracles, just for strength to live one more day. She searched online for any job, any job. A local cafe was hiring part-time staff. She applied. The owner replied within hours, asking her to come in that same afternoon. When she arrived, her heart nearly stopped. The cafe was the same bakery printed on the paper bag, Theo's Bread and Bloom. The old man from the bus stop stood behind the counter. He looked up and smiled. "I was hoping you'd show up." Sometimes, when we think God has forgotten us, he's simply preparing the path, through strangers, through coincidences that aren't really coincidences. But Elena didn't know yet that this stranger was about to change her life forever. They say angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they walk among us, in old coats, with tired eyes and kind smiles, sent not to perform miracles, but to remind us that God still does. Elena stood frozen, her eyes wide as she stared at the man behind the counter. He looked exactly the same gentle smile, the same brown coat, now hanging by the wall. "You," she whispered. "You were at the bus stop." He smiled softly. "I told you to hold on a little longer." Something inside her trembled. It wasn't fear. It was the strange, quiet realization that she wasn't invisible after all. He motioned for her to sit, poured her a cup of warm coffee, and said, "You're here about the job, right?" She nodded, still dazed. "Then let's begin," he said simply. Days turned into weeks. Elena worked at Theo's Bread and Bloom, a cozy cafe tucked on a quiet street corner. She learned how to bake, how to serve, how to smile again. There was laughter in the air, soft music, the smell of fresh bread, people coming and going with stories of their own. And through it all, the old man, Mr. Theo, as everyone called him, never stopped encouraging her. When she made mistakes, he didn't scold her. He'd simply say, "Every burned loaf has a lesson. The trick is not to quit before you learn it." At night, when she wiped the tables and turned off the lights, she'd often find small notes tucked under the counter. Handwritten words that lifted her soul. "You are not what you lost. Grace grows in broken places. Faith is not about seeing the way, it's about taking the step." Each note reminded her that maybe, just maybe, God was speaking again. One afternoon, Elena found Theo sitting alone, staring out the window with distant eyes. He looked weaker that day, his hands trembling slightly as he held his cup. "Are you okay?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Just a little tired, my dear." She frowned. "You should rest." He nodded. "Soon. But first, I need to tell you something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded letter. "If one day I'm not here, you'll know what to do with this." Her chest tightened. "Don't say that." He smiled again, that same calm, peaceful smile that had comforted her since the beginning. God sends us to each other for reasons we don't always understand at first. You were meant to walk through that rain. And I was meant to be there. A few weeks later, he didn't come to the cafe. No call. No message. Nothing. Elena went to his small apartment, the one above the bakery. A neighbor opened the door with tears in her eyes. "He passed away last night," the woman whispered. "In his sleep." The world blurred. Elena stood there, silent, her heart breaking like it had once before, but differently this time. This wasn't the pain of abandonment or loss. It was gratitude tangled with grief. She went back to the cafe, clutching the letter he had given her. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a simple note. "Dear Elena, if you're reading this, it means my time is done. But your story isn't. I once stood where you stood, lost, broken, ready to give up. A stranger helped me then, and I promised God that if he ever restored me, I'd spend the rest of my life being that stranger for someone else. Now it's your turn. Keep this place alive. Let it be a home for those who've forgotten hope. And remember, miracles don't end with me. They begin with you." At the bottom, a name, Theodore James Carter. And beneath it, a small line that made her cry harder than she ever had. "God still sees you." Months passed. Elena kept the cafe running, not for profit, but for purpose. She turned one corner of it into a hope table, where anyone could sit, share a meal, and leave behind a note of encouragement for others. People started coming. Lonely souls, job seekers, widows, strangers with quiet burdens. Each found warmth, food, and a message of faith left by someone who'd been where they were. The cafe became more than a place to eat. It became a sanctuary for the broken, a living miracle born from a stranger's kindness. Years later, a young woman came in one rainy afternoon, drenched, shivering, eyes filled with quiet despair. Elena smiled and handed her a warm pastry. "Take it," she said softly. "It's fresh." The girl looked surprised. "Why are you doing this?" Elena smiled. "Because someone once did it for me." They say when God sends a stranger, it's never just for that moment. It's for a lifetime of ripples. One act of kindness becoming another, faith passed like light from candle to candle. And maybe that's how heaven works, not through thunder or miracles in the sky, but through people who simply refuse to stop loving. Never underestimate a small act of kindness. You may just be the answer to someone's desperate prayer. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment if the story touches your heart. Bye.